Hey, good morning, everybody. Good afternoon, friends in South Africa. Today is Sunday, November 15, 2020, 0630 hours here in South Carolina. I'm going live audio. Normally I do these live things, video from way out in the woods in an anonymous location. And right now I'm doing it from home. Okay, I'm simultaneously recording this onto a little audio recorder that I carry with me. Like I say, I'm home, but it's amazing some of the stuff I have on me when I'm out in the woods, by the way. Carrying my passport, an audio recorder, just amazing the things I have with me when I'm out in the woods. Why do I do that? Good question. Okay, and I'm taking a little bit of time with the introduction because I want people to be able to share this and, maybe start a watch party, or kind of a listen party. It's going to have my old profile pick up there as we're doing this. And as I'm sitting here in the background, I'm sitting in a squeaky chair, so you can kind of hear the squeak. I'm try not to move around too much, try not to do that, but I wanted to give you a little bit of sound, but what that is, hopefully it won't be disturbing us. Okay, I've got some people here, listening, and I'm going to try to be able to, I have the ability right now to answer questions and respond to people as you guys are tuning in. Normally when I'm out in the woods for a variety of technical reasons, I can't do that. Okay, so election 2020, what the media is telling us that former Vice President Joe Biden won the election and that he's the president-elect, and they are currently crediting him with 290 electoral votes, and they are crediting Trump with 232 electoral votes, with a couple of states, Georgia, for example, still not completely decided. And for those of you who don't know how the Electoral College works, and I talked about it in audio clips that are being shared on Messenger, excuse me, basically there's 538 electoral votes up for grab. One electoral vote essentially for each senator in the U.S. Senate, plus one for each representative in Congress, plus Washington, D.C. gets 3. And so it totals out to 538. Half of that is 269. You must have an absolute majority to be declared president in the Electoral College. So you need 270, not 269, but you must have that half, 269 plus 1, for 270. So 270 votes is the magic number. And they're crediting Biden with 290, which means, that according to them, he has it. And so they're pushing this narrative that Biden won it. This is the same media that has been pushing the narrative that Trump colluded with Russians, Trump this, Trump that. By the way, I'm a dedicated Republican. Let me get this right up front here. I'm a very dedicated Republican. I'm hardline Republican, proud member of the Grand Old Party. Okay, I have never switched parties. I have never given money to a Democrat candidate. Okay, there are a lot of good people who are Democrats, but I'm a very dedicated Republican, and you're going to see why that's important here in a little bit. But I try to be fair and honest here. Okay. I'm not particularly, I couldn't vote for Trump in 2016. I just left the top of the ticket blank because he'd said and tweeted too many dumb things. He launched into personal attacks on Carly Fiorina, who was one of the other candidates running in the presidential primary. He launched into personal attacks on the wives of candidates. I didn't particularly like him in 2016. I kind of thought we were being played. I think his record as president has been pretty impressive. All right, so just a little bit of background. I'm not one of these Trumplicans. I'm a Republican. He joined my party. I didn't join his. All right, and that's going to be significant. Okay. So the media is currently crediting Biden with 290 and President Trump with 232. So they're calling Biden the president-elect. And then people who don't know how that works here in the United States, assuming that is the case, Trump is the U.S. president until the inauguration, at which there would be a peaceful transfer of power. However, this election result is not legitimate. What the media is reporting is not legitimate. They are repeating what I think is a lie. They are pushing it very hard because they want their boy to win. And if it turns out that after legal challenges Trump retains the presidency for another term. If that happens, they want him to be seen as illegitimate. They want to delegitimize his presidency. You folks in South Africa can, and I got a lot of listeners from there, you guys can kind of relate. All right, your families have been in South Africa for generations. You are white Africans. You are white South Africans. You are citizens of South Africa. Your parents were citizens of South Africa. Your grandparents were citizens of South Africa. Some of you out there, your great-great-great-great-grandparents took a piece of very arid land and turned it into a beautiful farm, and now you're being told that you're a settler, you're a colonist, you're a land thief. All right, so they delegitimize you. You can kind of understand how this is happening here in the United States. The political agenda of a political party, the media is totally, they're all feeding from the same trough. They all believe this crap that they spout, and so they're pushing this agenda. That's what's going on. Okay, so let me talk a little bit about this. And let me tell you about my background. Not only am I a dedicated Republican, but I actually worked with the Republican Party in Clark County, Nevada, which is where Las Vegas is located. And one of the things I did was I served as an election observer for a couple of the primary elections. They were supposed to have 3 observers. They needed at least one from each party. In both cases, there were 2 Democrats and myself. And honestly, the Democrats that I worked with in that particular thing, one of them was an assistant district attorney. These people they were really, really good people, absolute integrity. It was a really good crowd to work with. And by the way, I didn't see any funny business when I did that in 1996 in Clark County. But one of the things is that I learned what to look for. Our concern then dealt with the voting machines. You hit the button for your candidate, but how do you know the machine is really recording it for your candidate? Because you hit the button, it tells you it's recording it. What is happening inside the machine? Inside the machine, is it really tallying it for your candidate, or is it maybe kicking some of the votes to the other guy? Now, understand how you would rig the election with a machine. You wouldn't give all of the votes to the other guy because that would be pretty obvious. But if it's a fairly tight race, if the other guy is, if the guy that you want to win is 48% polling and the guy you're against is 52, if you can take one vote out of every, 11 or 12 votes, that's for the guy that's ahead that you don't want, and kick that over to your guy, then the guy that is actually polling at 52% goes down to about 48, and your guy who's actually polling at 48 goes up to 52 and you win the election. But it's within the bounds of error, so people think, well, the pollsters got it a little bit wrong, and it's not noticeable. That is how you would do it. So you wouldn't program the computer to send all the votes over there. You would program the computer to send a few. And nobody understands how these computers look. All of you listening, all right, you guys can look at a paper ballot and you can understand, here's this name, here's that name, and the check is next to this name. We all understand that. We have a physical ballot, we can count it. And so that was what we were doing in 1996. The people who were concerned, it was a Sequoia voting machine is what they were using back then, and the people who were concerned about that said, no, I want a paper ballot. So they were requesting mail-in paper ballots. And the whole idea is you vote absentee, it's a hard copy, it's a paper ballot. Now nobody can alter your vote. They can still lose it, they can still manufacture fraudulent ballots, but they can't electronically change your vote and have you walking out of there thinking that your vote went to your guy when really they stole it, okay? They have to do something, and it's usually easier to find fraud if it's not in the algorithm in the machine somewhere. Okay. Obviously, since then, things have gone electric. They were getting away from paper ballots, and people are a lot more computer savvy now in 2020 than they were in 1996. So people can look for things like algorithms. They've got forensic computer technology that people can go in and they can find a problem. You look at it, literally millions of lines of code, and you can find something and say, hey, this doesn't belong here. So we've got a much better capability now to ensure the integrity of the algorithms and of the electronics. Okay, that's just a little bit of the background. Now, here's where we were. The media was telling us all along that Biden had already won. They were saying, well, Trump doesn't have a chance, Biden is ahead. But there's an issue here with that. If the media is right and Biden truly was ahead, if the polls are right and Biden truly was ahead, then we have to believe the polls and Biden didn't win, because he was not leading in enough places. In some places where he was leading, he wasn't leading by enough to counter Trump's lead in other places. So this whole narrative that the polls are right and Biden won it's self-contradictory. It's obvious that the polls were getting something wrong. Okay. Now let's go back and talk about voting in general. We have a concept called inveterate voters. Inveterate voters are the people that show up at the polls. Okay, so 2020, November, this was a big presidential election year. Some people think that's the only election we have in America. There's Americans who are into politics that think that's the only election we have. All right, we have off-year elections where you vote for generally your governors and your secretary of state and attorney general in your states, where you vote for your state House of Representatives, your state Senate, and so on. Also, every even-numbered year has an election where the entire U.S. House of Representatives and one-third of the Senate is up. All right, these are the big elections. You've got your presidential election year, 2020, for example. You've got your off-year elections, 2018, 2022. And then you have your odd-year elections, which are usually local in nature, and sometimes you have some ballot measures and things of this nature. And then for each one of these elections, you have at least one primary, where you're choosing which candidates are going to go forward into the general election. Normally what that happens is you got several Democrats, you got several Republicans, and they're chosen by the voters of their respective party to represent the party in the general election. The Republican presidential primary in 2016 was pretty interesting. For example, I had Lindsey Graham, had Ted Cruz, and of course, Trump, now President Trump, was in there and getting a lot of attention. Okay, so that's how all of that is working. Now, let's talk about good old-fashioned voter fraud. All right, the way it has always been done. You trash one guy's ballot and you replace it with another one. We saw this happening last year in South Africa, the African National Congress. By my kind of loose calculations, they won, but they won with a plurality, not a majority. What we instead saw happening is boxes of ballots disappearing, and then in comes a pickup truck, you guys call it a bakkie, showing up with boxes of new ballots, and these new ballots get counted, and what happened to the ones that, and then somebody finds a box of a bunch of ballots that just got dumped somewhere, And so magically the African National Congress won the election with a majority right around 55%, when I think they should have had probably closer to 45%. That's the kind of stuff that goes on. There's all kinds of other things you can do. Some of it is legitimate, all right? You question a particular voter. When I was working with the Republican Party, we got all kinds of, and back then everything was, internet was new, email was new. We were getting information, you make a phone call, you request something, it comes in the mail, and so you get, paper copy, you get documents that you look at. And they used to send us all kinds of materials from back east. I say back east, that's the way we referred to it, because we were way out west in Las Vegas, Nevada. And we would get a box of materials, and it would have, how to conduct targeted voter registration, how to monitor the elections at the polls. And they had stuff, and back in the day what they did is they had index cards, 50 years ago, they had index cards for each voter in some of these well-established districts. All right, again, back east, some of these cities are pretty well established. And they had index cards for each voter, and so when somebody comes in and you think there's a problem, you say, all right, I'm challenging this voter, and then the election official is supposed to check their ID and stuff like that and make sure their voter registration is current. And that was the way it was done old school. The whole thing was to keep ineligible voters from casting votes. If a person had not renewed their voter registration, or if they had changed their address, if they had moved, this would keep somebody from voting in the wrong precinct. It might disenfranchise somebody who probably should be voting, but it was playing within the bounds of the rules, and the goal was to keep a person from voting in 2 or 3 elections. Now keep in mind, and this is a key concept for what we're talking about here, the time to stop voter fraud is before the fraudulent vote gets mixed in with the batch. You understand? Once all the votes are mixed together, you can't tell which vote came from where. It's deliberately designed that way so that you cannot go back and trace that. That's how you protect election integrity, is to not be able to go back and say, hey, you voted for the wrong guy. Because that is what they do in these communist countries. That's what they do in these totalitarian states. They make sure you vote for the guy you're supposed to vote for. So key to election integrity is to have your ballot be secret. That you cast your ballot for whomever you want to cast your ballot for, and that cannot be traced back to you. That allows you to tell the truth in the election, that this is the person I want. Of the choices, this is the one I'm voting for. And your motivation can be anything. It's like, hey, I'm just guessing, or hey, I don't like this guy, but I very much can't stand that other guy, whatever it happens to be. Holding the nose, voting for the lesser of two evils, whatever it happens to be. But that is key to election integrity. And so you have to challenge the voters before they cast their votes. And that's why there was this old school method of figuring out who the voters are. And that's why there's so much attention used to be paid in traditional party politics. You make sure that your voters are properly registered in the right district, that all the documentation is on file, that when they show up at the polls, we used to have to carry a voter registration card. Mine showed that I was a Republican. I was very proud of that. And every time I was working in some type of a voter registration, there was always Democrats there. We got along great. We loved each other. We joked around. But they were proud Democrats, and I don't have a problem with that. I was a proud Republican. But the point is, we had our voter registration cards up to date. It showed our correct address. It was the same address that was on our driver's license, E-I-E-I-O, all right? And if somebody says, hey, I don't know who this guy is, well, here's my voter registration card, here's my driver's license, and by the way, everybody here knows me. And then I can go in and I cast my secret ballot. If as a Republican I choose to defy the Republican Party, they don't like a particular candidate, nobody knows. I can do that and nobody knows. That's key to the election integrity. What the Democrats did this time, and they did it, and it was the Democrats, and they did it. What they did this time is they outflanked all of that election integrity thing in a couple of ways. One was by using paper ballots, flooding with paper ballots that were illegitimate. And then the other thing was flooding it with illegitimate voter registrations. Now, I documented and posted. There's a website called heritage.org. It's a pretty good website, pretty good information. Of course, anybody who disagrees with it, anybody on the left is going to say it's a radical, far-right wing, racist, homophobic, Islamophobic, all those words that they use, but they do pretty good work, and they've got documentation regarding every case of voter fraud that they've come across. They got a news source, so there's like a link where you can read the story, and then say, okay, this person was convicted of this, that person was convicted of that. The list of cases that they have is so long that it freezes up my phone. Okay, I download it on my phone. It sits there for a long time, sucking a lot of jizz, sucking a lot of data. And it's this big, long database of cases. What I did is I posted just a couple of images of a couple of incidents that they had out in California. And these showed the case of these guys that were going around. They were given cigarettes, they were given money, they were given food to homeless people. And in return, they were getting fraudulent voter registrations, they were getting signatures on petitions, and these guys, they were tried in a court of law, they were convicted, they were sentenced. These guys are doing time in county lockup, they have to do community service. Like I say, there's a big, long list at that website. I dropped the link there, but I put a couple images so you can read it and see examples of what we're talking about. I'm not making this up. This is how elections get rigged here in the United States. Okay? And what keeps elections from getting rigged is when parties, both parties, are sitting there, each one watching the other. Ideally have more than two parties looking at it, but you have to have a minimum of two parties. You cannot have a one-party state because now there's no checks and balances. I'm a dedicated Republican. If the Democrat Party got destroyed and no other party cropped up, I would start a new one because you cannot have one-party rule. That's a matter of principle. That would be a question of putting my country over my political party, which is the reason I support my political party, because I support my country. But if I ever had to make a choice, I would choose my country, obviously. Okay? But that's how these things are rigged. And so people, educated voters, active people in the community with a, good law enforcement, rule of law, and people have to have integrity. They've got to have educate. You can't have a bunch of people that think that anything goes and morality is relative. This is how you stop the voter fraud and how you keep an honest, fair election. Okay. Okay, a lot of background, a lot of ranting. Let me get back to where we were now. We've had this background established. Biden supposedly 290, Trump supposedly 232. Late on election night, 4 cities in 4 key swing states. By the way, what's a swing state? A swing state is a state they go Republican. In one presidential election they go Democrat, and another one, then they go Republican. They go back and forth. A Republican campaigning in a hardcore Republican state is a waste of time. The state is going to vote Republican. Don't waste your time. A Republican campaigning in a hardcore Democrat state generally is a waste of time. All right, that state is Democrat, they're going to vote Democrat. People focus their attention on the swing states. That's the general rule of thumb. There are good reasons to violate that rule, but that is the general rule of thumb. So what you see is Biden and Trump going to these swing states and saying, hey, vote for me, vote for our guy, or in Biden's case, we gotta hate Trump, we gotta get him out. Okay, so 4 cities, 4 key states: Milwaukee and Wisconsin, Detroit and Michigan, Philadelphia and Pennsylvania, Atlanta and Georgia. Late on election night, all of a sudden, in Democrat-controlled jurisdictions within those states, they found a bunch of hard copy paper ballots for Biden. Okay, do you get that? The election day is ending. Trump looks like he's winning. Then late that night, you've got, in Democrat-controlled areas, within these 4 key swing states, the states are Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, and Georgia. The cities in that order: Milwaukee and Wisconsin, Detroit, Michigan, Philadelphia and Pennsylvania, Atlanta and Georgia. In those Democrat-controlled cities, in those key important swing states, late at night everybody's gone to bed, and all of a sudden we've magically found paper ballots for Biden. Now, currently, with that 290 Biden, 232 Trump, they are projecting, they're saying that Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania went to Biden. They're saying Georgia is leaning Biden, but it's not final yet. Let's not talk about Georgia. Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania. Wisconsin has 10 electoral votes, Michigan has 16, Pennsylvania has 20. 10 plus 16 is 26. 26 plus Pennsylvania's 20 is 46. Biden's 290 votes minus 46 is 244. Those same 46 votes added to Trump's total of 232 is 278. If those 3 states were thrown fraudulently towards Biden and they should have gone to Trump, then the numbers really should be Trump 278, Biden 244, with Georgia up in the air. And by the way, if that same fraud happened in Atlanta, Georgia probably shouldn't be up in the air. Those 16 should also go to Trump as well. So yes, fraud could very easily have swung this election. Very, very, very easily. Did it. Okay. Milwaukee 2008. All right, we're not talking 2020. But we are talking about Wisconsin. By the way, why am I focusing on Wisconsin? I got information on Wisconsin. It's one of the key states. I went to school in Wisconsin. I graduated University of Wisconsin-Madison. My extended family is from and in Wisconsin. All right, I know a little bit about the state. The first time I ever cast a vote, I voted the straight Republican ticket in the general election in 1984 for Reagan's re-election. I was part of Reagan's landslide. And I have been a Republican ever since. Okay, so Milwaukee, Wisconsin. There was a 2008 report filed by the Milwaukee Police Department. It was the result of an 18-month investigation of the 2004 election results. Okay, you with me on that? We're not talking the 2020 election here. We're talking the 2004 election, investigated by the Milwaukee Police Department, which, by the way, Milwaukee's a Democrat city. But again, we're talking about people, whatever their political leaning, they have integrity and they enforce the law. We're talking about good people. I've got people that I may disagree with on certain political issues, but these are good people. They're competent people. They're doing their job. They're cops, right? Okay, so Milwaukee, 2008, February of 2008, they do a report of an 18-month investigation into the 2004 election. Their investigation showed felons. Now, felons are not supposed to vote. They're supposed to have, if you're convicted of a felony, you're not supposed to vote unless and until you get a pardon from the governor. Okay? They showed felons voting. Not only were convicted felons voting, convicted felons were working the polls. These were the guys in charge of making sure people voting. These were, they were checking voter registrations and stuff like that. Now, if you have somebody that is truly reformed and they're back on the right track and they've got a pardon from the governor, or if you have somebody that was wrongfully convicted and they've gotten things sorted out and that's great. But you have to have things sorted out and you have to have that pardon from the governor or else the felony conviction expunged or whatever you have to have. You can't just have convicted felons voting, and you sure can't have people who could be hardened criminals in charge of monitoring the elections and working the polls. All right, there's an issue here. They showed transient college students casting improper votes. By the way, college students. Now, I went to the University of Wisconsin-Madison, the People's Democratic Republic of Madison, Wisconsin, we used to joke about. Okay? This place is very left-wing. You get down on the engineering campus, you get down on the School of Business, it's not so bad. But holy cow, you get down, this place is pretty left-wing when I was there. And it has gotten farther left. Which way do these transient college students likely vote? Throw that out there as a question. These are the guys who want to feel the burn. These are the guys that think Trump is a fascist and a Nazi because they don't know what a fascist and a Nazi is. Okay. Something I've talked about, something I've put links on. Homeless people voting more than once. Ineligible voters casting votes. Now, this is not theoretical. Again, and I will drop the link here in the comments to this when I get done. This was a February 2008 police report filed by Milwaukee Police, the result of an 18-month investigation into the 2004 election. The bottom line was that the people who conducted the investigation said that they think that their vote probably didn't really count. These are the police officers, the investigators conducting the investigation. They were saying that the people voted, then the registration cards. See, and by the way, in Wisconsin, you're allowed to show up at the polls, register, and vote. And that is what I did in 1984. I wasn't planning on voting. I didn't come from a family where voting was, civic duty was something that was emphasized. I voted another time in Wisconsin in the off-year election in 2014. I voted to keep Governor Walker. I voted the straight Republican ticket, and that was to bring Walker, keep him in the governor's mansion for another 4 years. Only 2 times I voted in Wisconsin. Both times totally legit. The first time I'd never registered or voted anywhere before. I showed up with my checkbook and my ID as proof of, checkbook was proof of my address. And my ID, which was a Wisconsin ID, all right, but it was proof of who I was, but my checkbook with my apartment address printed on it was proof that I lived there while I was going to school. And then, there's maybe some problems with that, but that's what I did. And I didn't double vote or anything, by the way. In 2014, I think I had still been technically registered in Texas, but I had relocated to Wisconsin a few months previously. Again, totally on the up and up. I might have been somebody that they would have challenged if they'd really had their game on. But, yeah, ineligible voters casting votes. Registration cards filled out the same day. All right, you fill out the registration card, they check your stuff, they put the registration card in the file, they hand you the ticket, you go into the polls. And this is how I did it. When I was in Wisconsin, I registered that day and went and voted. The registration cards that were filled out were so ineligible that these people couldn't be tracked down. Now, remember, at this point, they've already cast their ballot. And now you can't even track them down to find out who they were. Okay? Sloppiness. Sloppiness covers this stuff up. The politicians did not address it. They hushed it up. By the way, in that Milwaukee situation, the criminal convictions were hard to get because the records were so sloppy that the jurors couldn't conclude beyond a shadow of a doubt that the fraudsters were actually guilty. And one thing that the Milwaukee police recommended was that they stop election day registration. And this is the rule here in South Carolina. It was the rule when I lived in Nevada. It was the rule in Texas. You had to register ahead of time and give them time to check you out and make sure that you really actually were a person and you lived where you're supposed to live. Okay. So that's the background, and that's what had happened previously in Wisconsin. Now, my question to you, given the history that we know there is in Wisconsin, given the circumstances that we know that they have, can we without any doubt say that there was no fraud that occurred? Given that there's a history of fraud, the police had complained about the process in an official report. Now, we've seen organization on the part of the left. They're bussing around a bunch of rioters, and they've got organization where these guys show up and magically there's a pallet of bricks paid for by somebody right there ready to be thrown. There's money to pay for vehicles and housing so that these people can go around the country, go to these different cities. And the FBI, the U.S. federal government, has filed charges on some of these people because they are traveling interstate. Once you cross state lines to go commit a riot, it becomes a federal offense. And they're prosecuting some of these people for that. All right. Do you really think the same people behind this are not going to have an interstate, well-funded operation in order to ensure that they have the votes that they need? They pushed this. They pushed this whole thing, this whole COVID thing. You got to stay home. You got to vote by paper. They mailed out ballots to people that did not request the ballots. They mailed out ballots to people that were no longer living in the state at that location. They mailed out ballots to people who were deceased. And then they had very sloppy situation where these ballots were harvested and brought back and hurried up and throw them into the pile so you can't distinguish which ballot was brought to you by a person with proper ID and which ballot just kind of sort of magically came in, brought to you by somebody else. And by the way, there have been some allegations about what's happening in Wisconsin. Now keep in mind when somebody shows up there, the ballot is in an envelope. You have to have correct information on the envelope, but the ballot itself is sealed inside the envelope. So you verify the information outside the envelope, but you can't see which way that person voted before you just toss that in and it gets counted. There were some problems with that. That is not really necessarily a major issue. The state has some common sense laws in place that if you know who this person is, you've just got a name, you know where they live, but they didn't fill out their address. There is some common sense that, I know him, he lives on the farm next to me, and here's his address, or he didn't fill in his zip code or whatever. The state does have some common sense laws that allow you to fill that in. The trouble is the common sense laws give leeway so that in a jurisdiction where somebody is actually trying to throw the election by bringing in fraudulent ballots, it gives the latitude to the poll workers to go ahead and fill this information in and throw these ballots in. You can have, and we do have, thousands of election workers who are good, honest, hard-working people. They are ensuring the integrity of the election. You only need to get a couple of people looking the other way at the right time, and they don't even have to look the other way deliberately. If you can distract them and slip in some ballots, you've got it. So yes, this is actually surprisingly easy to do. So I want to point out, I've documented a long history of the types of things that could have thrown this election. I've documented past problems within the state of Wisconsin, plus my personal testimony as to how that system could be abused. And I've pointed out that if you take Wisconsin, Milwaukee, and Pennsylvania, places where there are reports in 3 major cities of extensive ballot fraud, election fraud, if you take those 3 states' electoral votes and switch them from Biden to Trump, Trump has already won. Now, people think that what we're doing here, that we think our people have lost the election, and that we're just trying to win it back, and that's the narrative that the media is selling. That is not the case. I am willing to compete with Biden, with Harris. Harris is the one's going to wind up getting it if it goes that way. I'm willing to compete with these people in the arena of ideology. We'll win because we're right. It's going to be a fight because the deck is stacked against us. But more important to that is election fraud. What is literally at stake here is whether or not America is going to be a rule of law or whether we're going to just be a banana republic where pretty much anything goes and one side can tyrannize the other through rioting, looting, arson, blatant voter fraud, with the media, instead of investigating it, telling you that you must shut up about the problems you see. This is everything that the Soviet Union had and got rid of, but instead of a top-down government doing it, this is a conspiracy of ideology where all these people who are just playing naturally off the same page of music are doing this. Okay? Yes, it's funded. There's foreign money coming in. Yes, there is foreign money. And some of that money originally wasn't foreign. Some of that money was U.S. taxpayer dollars. I don't want to get into all of that right now. But U.S. taxpayer dollars sent overseas as foreign aid, passed around somewhere, coming back to somebody in the United States, and then magically donated from that U.S. person into a political action committee or a campaign. So yes, U.S. tax dollars are getting steered into election fraud. Yes, that does happen. But that's a whole separate story. Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, this went kind of long. Sorry if I went too long. Key points. The key points. There are 4 cities, Milwaukee, Detroit, Philadelphia, and Atlanta, in states which could have gone either way, in states which were leaning Trump, and in those 4 cities, after everybody went to bed on election night, they magically found a bunch of ballots that threw it towards Biden. And if you take the 3 of those states, Wisconsin, Milwaukee, and Pennsylvania, that they've already awarded to Biden, if you take those electoral votes away from Biden and give them to Trump, instead of 290 to 232, it becomes 244 to 278, and Trump wins. So at the heart of this is a very key. There's legal issues, there are criminal issues involved here, and there's the issues of rule of law and whether or not we live in a democratic republic, a republic with certain democratic principles ruled by law in our Constitution, or whether or not we live in a third world country, a banana country, a banana republic, a communist country. That is the key issue. If 3 of those states that they've awarded to Biden, where there was credible allegations of extensive election fraud, if those 3 states instead go to Trump, then Trump got it. So this is not over. The media is telling you Biden won, but Trump needs to fight this. And even if Trump gives up, somebody needs to continue fighting this. And we also need to start planning ahead, because this is the way the Democrats are going to do it until the good people in the Democrat Party regain control of their party from that Clinton crime family, from Obama and his organized Chicago mob outfit buddies, and from these other people. We're going to have to fight this. And by the way, just a parting comment. As a Republican, I'm not being partisan about this. I do think there's more corruption, much more corruption on the Democrat side. But I just want to leave a parting comment. I have looked through official records, the Foreign Agent Registration Act, database at the Department of Justice, the Federal Election Commission, etc., etc. And I have looked through this, and I have followed the trail of money from foreign terrorist organizations, foreign drug trafficking organizations, into the U.S. Congress. Both parties were involved. In fact, the one situation that I looked at pretty thoroughly, it was a former congressman, a Republican, who was involved in moving the money. So I'm not being partisan here. Our country is being threatened. And this goes far beyond the rioting and the looting, which is the implicit threat if we do not accept a thrown election, a rigged election. All right, ladies and gentlemen, thank you. I know this went kind of long. Hopefully this is useful, though. Hopefully there's good background. So I'm going to cut this out. Hit me with any questions, and I'll try to get back to you. Thank you. Have a good day.